Sofia Dourron for HYPER Annotations 3.0 Triple Ampersand's public program. Sofia is the curator of the Argentinian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale this year. Sofia, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I've been hearing a lot about Latin American representation at this year's Biennale, whether it's the pavilions themselves or a lot of Latin Americans working with other pavilions. So can you tell me a little bit about this? Do you think it's relevant? Do you have anything to say about it?
Well, I do think it's relevant. It's kind of a tricky question since the artistic director this year is Latin America. And of course, it was expected to have, like the Biennial was expected to have a lot of representation, so I think that's great. It is within the framework of the topic of the Biennial that is including all of those kind of left behind or not ever represented. So I think it is an important gesture to have, and being Latin American, South American, I think, we feel very, I wouldn't say proud, but, you know, happy to see this happen finally.
Yes.
So I think a lot of us are kind of, we all know these works. This is not new to us, but it's great that this is coming into a larger forum, to a larger audience.
Yes. And speaking of the theme this year being foreigners everywhere, of course, how do you think this pavilion, I hope the door collapses, how do you think that responds to that theme?
We started working around Luciana's work. Luciana is the artist, not necessarily trying to respond to the topic, but in the end it ended up relating to it, not in a very straightforward way. So the work deals with notions of architecture and space and how architecture and infrastructure do determine the ways that we behave in space, but also the way that we relate to each other. So by using the same materials or materials that are used in architecture and infrastructure, but using them in a different way and shifting space, then we are proposing to experiment with what happens when we shift those spaces that restrict our ways of behaving, relating, also our identities. So when we start speaking about undoing those boundaries and letting the doors collapse, being able to imagine other ways of inhabiting, then it starts to relate to Adriano's proposal. The other way it relates to the proposal is that the whole work is made of scaffolding and wood in different states and also expressing itself in different ways. And there is a notion there to be considered about the identity of this material. It's always the same material, but you will see in each sculpture it speaks differently, it expresses itself differently. So trying to think about identity in this case of the material, but also extrapolating this to other identities, not as something fixed, but as something flexible that changes over time, that is multiple at the same time.
Yes. And speaking of the materials, what I sort of notice is that you have wood, and of course doors are largely made of wood, but you have sort of, shall we say, industrial wood or wood that's gone through the industrial process, but also you have sort of tree branches. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about this or why it was important to have this juxtaposition, if I phrase it correctly.
So the artist has been working with scaffolding and industrialized wood for at least 15 years. Now she's bringing into her work these other wood in different states in order to bring us closer to the material, a closer experience, and in order to kind of shift our perception of the materials. All of the wood that is not industrial has been gathered from nearby areas and even recycled from previous pavilions. So from last year's architecture biennial. So a lot of the wood has its own biography already, and it will continue to have it because its work will be probably dismantled, and then the wood will continue its life. This overlapping of the industrial and the organic, they are both wood with different processes. Also speaks about the way in which we conceive boundaries of organic and industrial, and then start thinking about those limits between our relationships as well with those materials. The materials in each sculpture relate in a different way, or are connected in a different way, or even support each other in a different way. And with those images, we can think also about starting to think about other ways of relating to the material world that are not necessarily extractive.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, and what of this title? If I understand correctly, it's a reference to a poet, right? Can you say a bit about this?
It's a line from a poem from an Argentine poet and artist. And we chose this title, well, the artist chose the title.
Can you say the poet's name, please?
Elba Fabregas. In reference to different things, it kind of relates to Luciana's earlier work. Her work really came into being after 2001, when Argentina had a huge economic crisis, and that absolutely changed our lives and the way we related to the city. At that time, she started working with the idea of collapse and of destruction. But 20 years later, these ideas come into play in a different way. She used to work around the notions of construction and destruction, and now she's working more with the idea of transmateriality and transformation. And in that sense, we can think about, or we think about the idea of the collapse and the doors as a archetype of architecture that divides space and creates space, public and private. And the collapse of those doors is meant to represent this idea of losing the boundaries that are restrictive, these architectural, infrastructural, and social boundaries that restrict the way that we can think about inhabiting the world.
Yes. And you're the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in Buenos Aires, correct?
Yeah, I'm an independent curator now.
Yes. And how do you think that's different from curating Luciana's work or as part of the Venice Biennale or Pavilion?
So for us, it's a very different experience because we were selected through an open call by the government. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs holds the open call, and then it's like, you have to create the whole team. There's no infrastructure really. There's no institution that holds this project or that sponsors or there's a commissioner, yes, but it's like, okay, here are the keys to the pavilion, just do it. So, and also it's a huge responsibility, being here to represent your country and to represent a whole community of artists and of cultural workers at a time when Argentina is going through a huge economic crisis and we're getting a lot of cutbacks in budgets in culture and a lot of backlash as well. So representing our whole community right now was very important to us. So it gives it a very different feeling. And one more thing is that we've had this pavilion for a few years now, and it's not an easy space to work with. So there was a lot of work around the spatial, the way the sculptors occupy space. They work with the space, but it was like a lot of work around this specific architecture.
So usually we like to end things on a bit of a light note. Are there any pavilions or shows or simply venues that you're excited to see, or perhaps ones that you have seen that were good or notable? Or
I haven't seen that much. I've been here. I really liked Lebanon, Uzbekistan, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Nigeria, France, and probably a lot more. I want to go see the Vatican's pavilion at Giudecca because I think that venue is probably very interesting. So some things that I'm looking forward to.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.